Welcome, everybody. I'm here with Rickey Zachary, Global Head of Platform Engineering, ThoughtWorks today. Thanks for being here, Rickey. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're super excited to have you and to talk a little bit about AI and platform engineering. This is one of the key themes in the platform engineering community this year, and one of that a lot of analysts are observing. I think the just to set us up here, the interesting thing that I've been hearing from a lot of people, and that you and I've been talking a lot about throughout the years, is like, well, look, if it wasn't for AI, platform engineering would probably be the number one trend in enterprise today. But I think this, even in that sentence, it kind of like misrepresents a thing, because I think the real powerful thing is actually the combination of AI and platform engineering. We had Platform Con Paris last week, and there was a lot of conversation around the fact that AI is seemingly not really delivering on its promise in the enterprise today yet. There's this like famous study by MIT, infamous study, I guess, by MIT, like just like a few weeks ago, right? A couple months ago, that was kind of like, well, 95% of pilots in the enterprise are AI pilots in the enterprise are failing, and everybody's like freaking out. Oh my God, what does that mean? We're in a bubble. But ultimately, I think it speaks to the fact that right now it's very easy to get to this kind of very impressive demo very quickly. But then, and we know this, right? It's like, well, the real value in the enterprise is day 2, day 100 operations. And so how do we go from day 0 to day 100? And that's scalability and standardization, which means we need to have some sort of platform. So maybe we can start there with, does that make sense to you? Are you seeing sort of like, sort of like the more successful case studies maybe having, or use cases of AI in the enterprise having some sort of AI meets PE, as in platform engineering, or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing. That the evidence is playing out that way. Not only that study, I know there was one from IDC and one from Gartner that really is driving the idea that maybe we're in a bubble when it comes
Mhm.
to enterprise adoption of AI. However, what we're seeing at ThoughtWorks amongst our clients and customers are the ones that are the most successful have some sort of platform engineering foundations in place. They're able to use that to go from, hey, experiments or individual developers having success and productivity gains with AI to scaling that across the entire enterprise and scaling that so that it actually has business impact. So those are the ones that we're seeing that are the most successful. They have those foundational elements in place. They have all of the different parts and pieces, and they're able to say, hey, we gave GitHub Copilot to a bunch of devs. They are individually successful, but we're able to extract that individual success out, scale it out to teams, scale it out across the entire enterprise. And that's where we're seeing those individual organizations be successful. One other area that we're seeing them be successful, and it kind of makes sense as well, is organizations that are using their AI investment and focusing on individual use cases. They're not just
Mm.
saying, "Hey, we're just going to give a bunch of tools, Glean or Vertex AI, and we're going to focus on these different things." They're actually focusing on what are the use cases that our developers are struggling with,
Yeah.
and let's use AI through the platform to solve those particular problems. So those are the organizations that we're seeing be the most successful, as well as ones that are measuring the outcomes of that investment as well. So we're seeing those three trends around our successful organizations. Right, they're able to measure things. They're taking a very use case based approach, and then they're using the platform investments that they've already made to scale across the entire organization.
I love it. And there's also kind of like two more threads that you sort of touch on there, which is essentially, something that we discussed on stage at PlatformCon London and New York this year. It actually also came up at PlatformCon Paris last week, which is kind of this like dual, role almost of platform engineering and the platform engineering team, which is there's sort of like AI for platforms, I guess, right? And then platforms for AI.
Mhm.
And I guess like what we mean by that is, like we said, right, you need this sort of like foundation of a well-designed platform in order to really deliver on this like promise of AI in the enterprise and really enable those enterprise use cases. But also you need kind of like platforms infused with AI, right? And in fact, there is this like recent report by Gartner, just like a few weeks ago, it dropped, where they're saying this like 60-60-30 by 2028. So like three predictions, which like usually predictions, but like we were also looking at this number at this prediction that Gartner did back in 2023 that like by 2026, 80% or more of enterprises will have some sort of platform engineering initiative in place. And I remember at the time, it was kind of like even the most enthusiastic of us, it was kind of like, okay, well, this seems like a little bit aggressive. And actually, I think we're on track. And actually, like DORA came out like just like 2 or 3 weeks ago saying like,
Yep.
well, actually 90% of enterprise has some sort of platform in place. So like, take every prediction with a grain of salt, but Gartner seems to be hitting home pretty close with this kind of things. And so they're saying when it comes to the AI infused platforms, 60% of developer interactions with platform engineering services will be through some sort of like conversational AI, LLM or so. Also, 60% of internal developer platforms will include AI agents. And then 30% of internal developer platform users will have given agency to AI agents in some sort of steps of building and delivering software, right? So, I mean, are you also seeing that? So not just like the kind of like the platforms for AI, but also like AI being like hardcore infused into internal developer platforms?
Yeah, we actually are across all of the different dimensions. While last week while you were in Paris, I was actually in Chicago doing some strategy, some deep thinking with one of my colleagues, Chris Westerhold. And
Shout
what
out,
we
shout out to
Yeah, shout
Chris
out to
Westphal.
Chris. One of the things that we were really thinking about was where's that future going when it comes to the platform, right? So the platform can certainly support the creation of new AI agents and those things. So that would be, hey, I want to put an agent in my service catalog. How do I make a new agent? It's in the service catalog. I have all the orchestration and those things that are there. So certainly that would be one way. But when you start talking about the use cases that the platform should support, knowledge management, developer experience, observability, all of these different things that would be foundational to the platform, those need to be infused with AI. And now the new added interface is, dev portal,
Yeah.
IDE, CLI, and then conversational interface. So you have to have the ability to infuse those traditional platform engineering foundational capabilities with AI, not only to just extract friction. So one of the use cases that we're really interested in right now is CI/CD migration. So we go into an
Mm,
organization, we find out, oh my goodness, you all have 90 different CI/CD tools. Why are you still using cruise control? Shout out to cruise control. But hey, you want to get onto a modern platform, right? So we've got people
yeah.
that are saying, hey, we've made a huge investment in Harness, or we've made a huge
Yeah.
investment in GitHub Actions, and we want to provide easy pathways for organizations and for individuals to get onto that, to teams and people to get onto that. Normally
Yeah.
that would be golden paths and we'd have all these conversations about those things, but now you can have AI migration tools that say, hey, I'll read all your pipelines and give you an 80 or 90% solution on the new platform. Wow, that's
Yeah.
a huge uplift. That's directly AI directly in the platform solving a problem. And those are the more successful initiatives than we're just going to give people the tools. It's actually embedded within the platform engineering capabilities. So we're actually seeing that happen more and more and more. And again, the successful organizations are taking that approach where they're saying, we're going to embed AI both as something that the platform provides, but we're going to also
Yeah.
embed it within the platform.
Yeah. And what are the challenges in that? Because obviously, if I can't like, I still see like a lot of platforms where the guardrails are not as well defined. And therefore it's like quite challenging for platform teams to manage all the possible inbound requests that developers create. And
Mm-hmm.
that obviously 100x is when you put AI in the mix, right? Because now all of a sudden, like I'm having like a conversation with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, God knows what comes out of that as an actual request, right? And it's a little bit like the analogy that I heard that I find quite interesting. It's a little bit like, you're having this kind of, golden paths, but also this like sort of like paved roads, right? Like we said, right? So it's kind of like you have a road that's not that well paved, and now all of a sudden, instead of having like 10 cars driving over it, you have like 2,000 cars driving over it, including the agents themselves, right? So now you have just like trucks like speeding over it, and but the road is still not that well paved, so that just becomes like a huge mess, right? So like, what are the kind of practical challenges that you're seeing on the field from this sort of almost cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, I'd actually categorize it in two ways. One is just the traditional platform engineering stuff, right? To your point, if the road's not paved and you're trying to put, a self-driving car down a non-paved road, or
Yeah.
something that's going super, super fast down the road, you're going to have some of those issues. And those traditional problems are things like the organization doesn't have the right platform engineering operating model. They're not providing the right abstractions to developers. They're just not solving some of the core platform engineering elements that are there, the foundational elements that are there. So that's the idea of, if you want to start using AI at scale, you have to be so tall to ride the ride. Like, it's like a roller coaster. Hey, you got to be this tall to ride the ride, and you have to be able to get on. So things like platform operating model stuff, things like, hey, am I providing the right abstractions? Am I doing self-service right? One that is coming up more and more is, if you're going to provide these conversational interfaces to the developers and let them interact with them, most people are solving that problem just by saying MCP. We're going to just MCP everything, and we're going to agent wash. We're just going to say MCP and agents enough, and hopefully that solves the problem.
MCP on all the slides.
Yeah, right. What we've been talking a lot about with some of our customers is the idea of still taking an API first approach, but MCP enabled. So if you have the right underlying APIs there, you are already going to be providing self-service capabilities through those things. I don't care about what developer portal you're using, but if you're already exposing those through a self-service manner, your number of tickets that are low, you're not primarily using ticket ops, you've got this self-service capability. It's easy to then move that over to conversational interfaces that are powered by MCPs. But if you don't have the right API strategy within the platform to both put APIs in production correctly, or to expose platform capabilities to the developers in the right way, you shouldn't be talking about conversational interfaces. You should be talking about those foundational pieces. The second part of that is, once you start interacting with with the AI elements, I think it's really, really difficult to actually identify what the right workflows are that could be augmented by agents and by AI. There's a lot of things that are just workflows that should just be automated through, RPA stuff, just through normal workflow automation. There's actually not the need. There's generally not the need for, these agents that are in there, fully autonomous agents, no humans in the loop. There are some that should be there, but a lot of them aren't. And there's this over indexing on, hey, I better put AI in here, instead of just saying, actually, if we just had a simple workflow management thing that was just taking some things from step 1 all the way through to step 8 with no AI, we'd actually get more benefit there. So I think being particular about the types of workflows that need to have AI introduced from an augmentation or enablement standpoint is the problem. Once you get all of the platform engineering stuff kind of done and settled, and then you want to add AI into your platform engineering workflows and within the ecosystem, I think is really difficult to identify what those workflows are for most organizations.
Right, but that's interesting, right? Because you also mentioned earlier golden paths. So, like, how do you advise companies right now? Where do they start, right? Like, what teams should they think about starting with, and then what paths should they start rethinking, right? Like, so what are the lowest hanging fruits that you see right now in terms of like, okay, well, this is like a clear win and something where we can also show value pretty quickly, right? Where it's not going to take us like a year of this MCP talks to that MCP, and then that slides and that blah blah blah, and then like I still show no value, and then I have a problem with the funding later on as a project, right? Like, where should I think about starting, both from a team selection perspective, but also importantly, I think from like, what golden paths, is there like a framework to think about which golden paths I want to start building first, both from a PE perspective and obviously also what I want to A5 first, right? So from an AI standpoint.
Yeah, I'm going to give three very specific examples, and it's the three
Mm-hmm.
that I'm telling everyone that they should start off with. And I think it's unfortunate that from a framework perspective, the difficult part is that it's a lot of tough stuff to do. So from a framework perspective, we're still telling our clients to do value stream mapping, to still kind of like understand what their flow looks like. Those things will naturally kind of like bubble up. Oh, wow. It's taking a really, really long time. We've got a ton of silos to get something from out of the hands of the developer via a pull request into production, right? We've got tickets, we've got infrastructure, all of those things. Once you see what that value stream looks like, that's where you can start to identify some of those areas that probably and certainly should be in AI enabled, where we should be putting
Mm-hmm.
certain things in, not only to decrease the amount of communication and chatter, but to also kind of like fully automate some of those very, very mundane tasks that don't really need to be automated with for workflows. They need something a bit more heavyweight that's there. So I think like the first thing from a framework perspective would be, okay, just do your value stream mapping. I know it's boring. Nobody wants to hear that. There's no silver bullet. You have to put in the work there to understand what the entire value stream looks like and where you should apply that. That was also one of the recommendations out of the DORA report. We've been doing that for quite some time at ThoughtWorks. However, if you do want a silver bullet, the three areas where we've been
Give it to
seeing,
us.
yeah, where we've been seeing, and where I've been recommending those teams start are CI/CD pipeline automation. A lot of organizations don't have full code commit all the way to delivery into a semi-production environment or even production environment set of automation that's there. That's an area where you're going to see immediate improvement in some of the top line DORA metrics like lead time and deployment time, but you're also going to see a tremendous improvement in just developer productivity. So that's
Mm-hmm.
an area where you can put in $1 of AI investment and probably get 1.5 to maybe even 1.75 return on that investment. And again, we're talking about things that feel like it should be fairly simple, like, oh yeah, we can write build scripts using, AI, or I can do a ton of automation where I would have been talking to another person. I can actually talk to an AI agent or to a chatbot or something like that within the SDLC to either get
Sure.
information or to do full creation of the pipeline. It's small, it's fit for purpose, it's task based, it's use case based, and you get tremendous uplift out of those areas. So CI/CD pipeline automation is an area where we see a tremendous amount of uplift. It's really easy to get in there. The other area that I almost always advise clients and organizations to look into is testing.
Mm.
It's probably the thing that no one does well. No one understands how to actually start doing testing, but there's so much investment that can be
No
made
one
from an
wants to
AI.
do.
Nobody wants to do it. It's super, super difficult. I go to these organizations and they're like, yeah, we have a 6-month cycle where everyone's manually testing. And you're like, hey, there's this thing called AI out there where you can actually write tests and have something, fairly high fidelity come out of it. And so and it's super mundane. Nobody wants to do it, but tremendous value in shortening the activity time, increasing quality, providing those safeguards there. And it's usually not something that platform engineering teams provide. So
Mhm.
or that no one is really responsible for within the organization. So it is something where we see immediate value. It's almost turnkey, some of the tools that are there in that space that are providing that. And that also includes test data management as well. So that's an area where seeing tremendous uplift. And again, that's an area where a lot of clients are spending 6, 7, 8 months of cycle time to do that. They have really bad looking test pyramids. They're not testing appropriately at the unit component integration test at all. They're really focusing on manual tests, and you can actually reduce that amount of time and improve your testing outcomes there. And then the last area is around observability and operations. So we're doing a ton of work on AI ops,
Right.
auto instrumentation when it comes to OTel, all of those different things that are there. Tremendous uplift on getting off of kind of like some of the traditional, oh yeah, I've got to go and do a heavyweight instrumentation from an infrastructure perspective over into, hey, I can use OTel and I don't care what tool I use on the back end. I can just use OTel for everything, and then I can use any of the tools. I can switch from Prometheus to something that's a bit better. I can get off of some of the more heavyweight tools onto things that are lighter weight that provides me with way more telemetry. And then once you start doing that OTel stuff, you can start looking at exemplars. You can start looking at predictive analytics and modeling within the observability space. And that's tremendous uplift, right? That's cost avoidance, that's change failure rate avoidance, that's mean time to repair. I don't know if DORA is still aligning to that, but I think it's still a fair metric, right? How long does it take me to get something back into a known good state? Those are all things where, again, if I was paying $1 and I was able to get 1.5 out of that investment, that would be another area where I'd be looking at. So right now, those are the 3 areas that we're nudging most of our clients if they're thinking about platform engineering and AI investments. Those are the 3 areas. But again, there's a lot of different areas where you can look at. There's one area I actually would I generally avoid, but because I think it's kind of like a commodity space right now, and that's codegen. Everybody's doing codegen. Everything is codegen focused, right? All of the models are all codegen focused, and I think that that's a fair. I mean, continue to make an investment in codegen, but when it comes to, hey, how can I get $1? If I'm paying $1, how can I get more than $1 out? I don't think codegen is the area where you're going to get super tremendous uplift.
To your point, it's like massively commoditized already, right?
Yeah.
Like it was actually this is like the first use case that we had in our state of AI and platform engineering survey. It was just code gen first, documentation second, and then just like emailing, messaging is the third one, right? So all like language manipulation, one way or the other, whether natural language or code. And that seems to be the straightforward thing, right? That also, to your point, all these LLMs are optimized for. But then actually, what's the impact on an enterprise value, right? To your point, the $1 in, $2 out, or $1.5 out, it's usually more in this like infrastructure, testing. So you mentioned, right, CI/CD testing, and then the observability and monitoring bit, right? So I really like that. I also really like how you really kind of threaded the ROI and metrics throughout all of those 3 things. And you and I are going to talk more about metrics in some upcoming conversations.
I think it's in 3 days.
It's in 3 days.
I think it's in 3 days.
Thanks for the reminder. So we'll talk in 3 days about the metric stuff, but maybe just as a little teaser, what is the you mentioned DORA, of course. There's a lot of you're very familiar with space. The space framework as well. Yes. So like, what are the how should enterprise maybe think, again, just as a little teaser, as metrics in this evolving AI and platform engineering kind of like overlapping Venn diagram space, right? Because we have some established stuff. To your point earlier, right? Like some of this might make sense. Some of it, maybe is more of a lagging indicator versus a leading indicator for this like newer stuff that we're doing. So how can we think about it? Should these frameworks evolve? Should we look at new frameworks? How do you guys think about it on the field?
I don't think those frameworks need to evolve. Actually, again, I think the idea the idea of why we were introducing or so quick to introduce AI into software development in particular, right? You can introduce it anywhere that you wanted to. Across all of these different industries, right? Doctors and lawyers and all of these different places. We were quick to introduce it into software engineering for a couple of reasons that lead back to the metrics. I think software engineering in particular for most managers and executives is kind of like this black box, right? They ask some developers to do something. The developers go off, and then 6 months later, this thing pops out, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, it wasn't really close, or it was kind of like what we thought it was going to be, and we need another 8 months to get it to where you want it to be." So it feels very nebulous. That's there. It's a high amount of cognitive load. It's high knowledge work. So that also was something that was ripe for that. So this idea of it being kind of this ambiguous activity with a high amount of cognitive load, and it's super costly when it comes to like an organization. That normally software engineers are the highest priced folks within an organization. So those three things kind of made it really ripe for, hey, let's introduce AI. Let's try and automate some of the toil and friction and waste out of it. And then you have some of the people that are on the more extreme side where they're saying, hey, I can introduce AI and get rid of a bunch of devs. We don't see that being successful in most organizations. We see them generally hiring back some of those devs that they early on kind of got rid of, that are there. So with those three things in mind, I think that the metrics then still play on top of that, right? This idea of, all right, if it's something that I don't really know what's going on inside of the box, what are the metrics that if I add AI, make that more clear, right? So that's about predictability, that's about deployment time and frequency and all of those things that are there. So again, effectiveness is the outcome that we're looking for from that standpoint. So the individual, I think the lagging indicators of that are things like DORA, or things like some of the space things that are there.
Yeah.
I think that there are leading indicators of that success when we start talking about activity time, predictability of certain upfront outcomes. When we start talking about time to innovate in particular, like, can I innovate faster? That's a leading indicator that things are going to be successful downstream. Can I ideate faster? Can I do knowledge management faster? Those are all things upfront, leading indicators of, okay, we're going to be pretty successful down the line when it comes to understanding how software engineering is working within the organization. Then all of the cognitive load stuff, I think, is equally as important. And I think that we have a pretty, I almost want to say that there's metrics fatigue within the cognitive load, kind of like developer experience space, because we have DevX, we've got the stuff that the folks over at DX were doing. We've got a number of tools in that space to identify cognitive load. We have a ton of techniques. Everyone is talking about all of those different techniques, but I think it is the idea of that needing to be more fit for purpose and needs to be more about productivity when it comes to extraction of friction, cognitive load out of the system, and not only just, hey, there's 40 hours in a week and we want to get 44 hours worth of work done. Right. I think that that's a useful lagging indicator, but what I don't think that does is it doesn't identify, well, why can't I get 44 hours worth of work done, right? Is there some sort of prohibitor? How can I apply AI to help improve cognitive load versus just adding AI into it? And then I think that last portion of the actual ROI, how much does it cost? How do we decrease that? Is tied to the first two, right? If I can be more predictable, if I can have higher quality, if I can decrease cognitive load, and I'm spending, $1 million on development and engineering, I can reduce that. One, I can understand, where am I spending that money? Is it more on KTLO, or is it actual revenue generating activities? And if it's on KTLO, how do I apply AI to decrease that KTLO number? Because that's what the executives are going to be interested in. Am I putting in the amount of money and getting out business value out of it? Not that KTLO is not business value, but that's something that can be automated out through some of the AI investments that you're making. And then how do you leverage that new investment that you made over to, the normal stuff that you want to do, business generation, in writing actual code that's going to go into production, not fixing code that's already there.
Absolutely. And it's like what you said, at the end of the day, all of this is about making everything predictable, right? Like it's whether we're talking about minimum viable platforms and this like quick iteration, which is really about making platform engineering predictable in
Mm-hmm.
the enterprise, or I think applying well-designed golden paths principles and well-designed platforms as a foundation to actually make AI more predictable and AI's impact more predictable in the enterprise. Ultimately, we're always kind of like abstracting one level higher
Mm-hmm.
and really driving against this idea of like, how do we make this entire thing more predictable, more standardized, and therefore more scalable in terms of impact and to your point, ROI into the enterprise, right?
Yep.
So awesome. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. That was super interesting. We'll come back for more with the metrics in 3 days, like you
Of
said.
course.
And thank you in the meantime, Ricky. This was super fun.
Yep. It was awesome. Always a pleasure, Luca.